Imagine looking into the eyes of a child and seeing nothing but innocence, joy, and the light of youth. Now imagine discovering that those same eyes have witnessed a world of pain, oppression, and silence that history tried to erase. What was once a simple smile suddenly becomes a doorway into the hidden depths of human suffering, resilience, and moral truth. The portrait of the smiling boy at first glance presents nothing more than a serene and charming image. The eyes sparkle with what seems like innocence and carefree joy, the lips curved into a gentle smile, and the posture relaxed yet composed. To the casual observer, it is a celebration of youth, a frozen moment of happiness captured in the delicate strokes of paint. Yet, as historians and psychologists might note, appearances are often deceiving, and the human face, especially when framed in art, carries far more than the surface it shows. In this portrait, the smile is not merely a representation of emotion, it is a mask, a carefully constructed interface between the inner world of the boy and the outer world that surrounds him. The concept of the mask is a profound one in human psychology, rooted in both survival and adaptation. Humans, particularly those subjected to oppressive circumstances, often learn to present a version of themselves to the world that conceals their pain, fear, and vulnerability. This boy, whose early life was shaped by the brutal reality of enslavement, understood this implicitly. The smile, radiant and effortless in appearance, was not an accidental expression of joy, but a learned and necessary shield. It became a silent communication with the outside world, a subtle assertion of normalcy in the face of an existence that denied him autonomy and freedom. Art, as a medium, has the power to capture not just the superficial qualities of a subject, but also the layers of meaning beneath the surface. In capturing the boy's image, the artist inadvertently immortalized the duality of human experience, the interplay between what is seen and what is concealed. While the viewer may perceive only the charm and innocence of the boy, the true narrative is far more complex. The smile is a threshold into the boy's inner life, a hint at the resilience required to survive, a symbol of the strength needed to exist in a world that dehumanizes those born into subjugation. In Jungian terms, the mask is intimately connected with the persona, the aspect of the psyche that is presented to the external world. The persona is neither entirely false nor entirely true. It is a negotiated identity that allows the individual to function socially while often hiding the raw and vulnerable elements of the inner self. For the boy, this persona is embodied in the smile. It allows him to appear acceptable, even charming, to those who hold power over him, while simultaneously concealing the fear, sorrow, and longing that define the hidden self. This dynamic illustrates a profound psychological tension, the coexistence of light and shadow within a single human being. The light, represented by the smile, captures the ideal, the socially palatable, the image of innocence, while the shadow holds the reality of suffering, trauma, and the constraints of circumstance. The portrait thus becomes a visual metaphor for the human condition itself, emphasizing the gap between how one appears and how one truly experiences life. Beyond the psychological perspective, the portrait also communicates a broader social commentary. The mask in this context is not only a personal defense mechanism, but also a reflection of societal expectations. The society that surrounded this boy, rooted in structures of power and inequality, demanded that those it oppressed conceal their suffering, adapt their behavior, and, when possible, present an image that did not disrupt the comfort of those in dominance. In this way, the boy's smile can be seen as a survival strategy, a response not only to personal hardship, but also to the unspoken demands of a social order that renders him invisible, except as an object to be controlled. The tension between appearance and reality in the portrait highlights an essential truth about human perception. What is visible is never the entirety of what exists. Art, history, and psychology intersect here, demonstrating that to truly understand a subject, one must look beyond the superficial. The mask, while protective, is also a conduit for empathy and insight, offering a clue to those willing to perceive the hidden narratives beneath the surface. Furthermore, the portrait serves as a reminder of the universality of masks in human experience. Every individual, in varying degrees, learns to hide, perform, and adapt in response to circumstance. The boy's smile is an extreme illustration of this universal phenomenon, amplified by the severity of his oppression. It embodies the paradoxical nature of human resilience, how suffering can coexist with beauty, how constraint can coexist with expression, how survival can require both compliance and subtle resistance. In observing this portrait, the viewer is invited into a silent dialogue with history and psychology. The face before them is not merely a depiction of a single boy, but a representation of countless unseen individuals whose outer expressions conceal inner realities too complex, painful, or socially unacceptable to be openly displayed. The painting thus transcends its immediate subject, becoming a mirror of human experience and an exploration of the tension between self-presentation and inner truth. Every brushstroke, every shadow, every curve of the lips and eyes speaks to the duality of existence, revealing how identity can be both constrained and asserted simultaneously. It demonstrates that masks, while sometimes born of necessity, are also profoundly expressive, capable of communicating resilience, hope, and subtle defiance even in silence. In reflecting on this portrait, we are compelled to question our assumptions about appearances, to reconsider the narratives we construct from the surfaces we observe, and to acknowledge the hidden depths present in every human life, especially those marginalized or oppressed. The boy's smile, therefore, is not simply an aesthetic detail, it is a powerful symbol of the mask, of the interplay between outer image and inner reality, of survival and adaptation, and of the human capacity to endure while retaining dignity and identity. Through this single portrait, the profound complexity of human experience is captured, a silent testament to resilience, an invitation to look beyond appearances, and a reminder that what is seen is only a fragment of the whole story. The discovery that the boy in the portrait had been born a slave transforms the seemingly simple image into a vessel of historical memory, carrying within it the weight of hidden wounds that history often seeks to conceal. At first glance, the painting presents only innocence, a quiet smile frozen in time, but beneath the surface lies a lifetime of unspoken pain, oppression, and systemic injustice. These hidden wounds are not merely personal, they are collective, intertwined with the experiences of countless others who were similarly marginalized, erased, or silenced. The portrait becomes a symbol of what society has often tried to forget or sanitize, and the boy's presence within it is both a reminder and a challenge, urging viewers to confront the deeper realities of history that have been deliberately obscured. In this sense, the painting functions as a threshold between what is visible and what has been buried, compelling us to acknowledge the hidden narratives that shape human experience. The wounds hidden in history are not just scars left on the body or the psyche of one individual. They are traces left on the collective consciousness, transmitted across generations in ways that are both subtle and profound. To truly understand these wounds, one must recognize that oppression leaves imprints not only on those who directly suffer, but also on the societies that perpetuate or ignore it. The portrait invites a confrontation with this layered reality, showing us that what we see is only the surface manifestation of centuries of structural inequality, cultural erasure, and human cruelty. The boy's smile, fragile yet enduring, is emblematic of the resilience of those who carry such wounds silently, often adapting and surviving while the world around them remains oblivious to their suffering. In Jungian terms, the hidden wounds of history can be understood as aspects of the collective shadow, the parts of our shared humanity that we repress, deny, or fail to acknowledge. The shadow encompasses cruelty, injustice, and the unspoken truths that societies prefer to hide, and yet it exerts influence on our cultural and psychological landscapes. By uncovering the boy's origins, historians force us to confront this shadow, illuminating the dark corners of the past that have been overlooked or forgotten. The portrait thus becomes more than a work of art. It becomes a mirror, reflecting not only the boy's personal experience, but also the broader systemic forces that shaped his life and the lives of countless others. Every detail of the painting, the innocence of his gaze, the apparent serenity of his posture, the calmness of the setting, stands in stark contrast to the realities of bondage and deprivation. This contrast heightens the emotional impact of the discovery, revealing how easily suffering can be masked, hidden, or aestheticized, and how easily societies can distance themselves from the pain they have caused. The boy's life, once buried in historical obscurity, emerges as a reminder that the stories of those who suffered in silence are just as critical to understanding the past as the narratives of those in power. Their absence from conventional history is not an indication of insignificance, but of the selective memory of societies that shape and record their own stories. By reclaiming the boy's history, we are reminded that history is not neutral. It is a construct shaped by who is allowed to be remembered and who is forced into anonymity. This acknowledgement is both sobering and transformative, as it challenges us to consider how many other hidden wounds remain unrecognized, lying dormant in archives, oral traditions, and unexamined corners of cultural memory. The hidden wounds of history are also deeply psychological, influencing identity and perception in ways that ripple far beyond the individual. Descendants of those who suffered oppression may carry unacknowledged trauma, manifesting in patterns of fear, caution, or adaptation that seem inexplicable without a historical lens. The boy's portrait becomes a symbolic representation of these intergenerational effects, embodying the silent transmission of experience and the ways in which history shapes the human psyche long after the original events have passed. The act of unearthing his story serves as a form of psychological restoration, a way to integrate what was once hidden into conscious awareness, to acknowledge the full reality of human experience, and to confront the truth of injustice. Furthermore, the hidden wounds revealed in the portrait compel us to examine not only the past, but also the mechanisms through which suffering is erased or ignored. Who decides which histories are preserved? Whose stories are deemed worthy of commemoration? What cultural or institutional forces have maintained the silence surrounding those who suffered? In confronting the boy's history, we are forced to confront these questions, recognizing that the wounds of history are perpetuated not only by acts of cruelty, but also by acts of omission. The rediscovery of the boy's true identity transforms the portrait into an ethical and emotional guide, teaching us that to understand history fully, we must acknowledge what has been buried, explore the silent spaces of human experience, and honor those whose lives were hidden in plain sight. The painting, therefore, becomes a portal into the realities of the past, offering an opportunity for empathy, reflection, and moral engagement. It asks us to see beyond the smile, to recognize the resilience encoded within it, and to honor the unseen suffering that shaped it. In this way, the hidden wounds buried in history are not only revealed, but also given the possibility of recognition and remembrance, allowing the past to speak to the present and perhaps guide a more conscious, compassionate future. The boy's portrait, once a symbol of innocence alone, is now inseparable from the weight of history, a visual testament to the lives that were obscured, the stories that were silenced, and the enduring power of truth to emerge even from the shadows. The discovery that the boy in the portrait was born a slave reveals not only a personal tragedy, but also a reflection of the collective shadow of society, a shadow that encompasses all the cruelty, exploitation, and injustice that communities often deny or suppress. Carl Jung described the shadow as the part of the psyche that is hidden, repressed, or denied, yet it exerts profound influence over both individual behavior and societal structures. In the case of this boy, his life and image embody the shadow of a society that has historically profited from the suffering of others while refusing to confront the moral and ethical consequences of its actions. The smiling boy, frozen in paint, represents the intersection between innocence and oppression, the personal and the societal, the visible and the hidden. His image forces us to recognize that the world's collective conscience is rarely as clean and virtuous as it appears. Beneath the surface of civility and progress often lie systemic inequities and unacknowledged cruelty. The collective shadow is not a metaphor confined to abstract thought. It is tangible in the institutions, practices, and cultural norms that allow injustice to persist. The boy's portrait is a stark illustration of this shadow because it demonstrates how innocence can be commodified, how human lives can be reduced to aesthetic objects, and how the suffering of one individual or an entire group can be ignored while society celebrates the superficial beauty that remains. Each brushstroke of the portrait, each detail of the smile, embodies a tension between what is socially acceptable and what is morally concealed. It is a reminder that societies often project a polished image of themselves while suppressing the evidence of the harm they inflict, and that the shadow persists in silence until it is brought to awareness. In Jungian terms, confronting the shadow is essential for growth, not only on a personal level, but also on a collective one. Just as individuals must acknowledge their own hidden fears, desires, and capacities for cruelty to achieve wholeness, societies must recognize the injustices they have perpetuated to heal and evolve. The boy's life and portrait confront viewers with a moral imperative: to see beyond surface appearances, to acknowledge the suffering that was ignored, and to integrate these truths into our understanding of history and culture. The collective shadow is also evident in the way that certain narratives are preserved while others are erased. The boy's existence, his bondage, and his humanity were all obscured for generations, leaving behind only fragments of recognition in the form of an image. The portrait itself, while beautiful, conceals the reality of systemic oppression, requiring historical investigation to reveal the truth. This process mirrors the way societies repress uncomfortable truths. Only through careful reflection, research, and willingness to face moral discomfort can the shadow be illuminated and integrated into a broader understanding of history. In acknowledging the collective shadow, we confront the tension between admiration and guilt, between aesthetic appreciation and ethical responsibility. The boy's smile, which once seemed purely innocent, now carries the weight of complicity. It challenges viewers to question the structures that allowed his suffering, the individuals who benefited from it, and the cultural silence that enabled such conditions to persist. This confrontation is uncomfortable because it forces recognition that the shadow is not distant or abstract. It is present in the very foundations of society and at times even within ourselves. The collective shadow also contains the potential for transformation. By facing it, societies can learn to honor those who were oppressed, acknowledge past wrongs, and integrate these lessons into a more conscious and equitable future. The boy's portrait becomes an agent of this transformation. What was once an object of superficial admiration is now a catalyst for moral reflection and societal awakening. The shadow reveals that progress is incomplete without accountability, that beauty and culture cannot fully exist without justice, and that true recognition of humanity must include those who were historically denied it. Moreover, the collective shadow is not limited to the past. It persists in contemporary attitudes, practices, and structures. The portrait, though historical, forces a present-day engagement with the moral implications of human actions and systemic inequities. It invites reflection on how the legacies of oppression continue to shape social, economic, and cultural realities, challenging us to question what is hidden in plain sight and to seek ways of addressing the lingering effects of injustice. The smiling boy thus becomes both a symbol and a teacher, representing the unacknowledged suffering embedded in societal systems and the moral necessity of facing these truths. His image reminds us that the shadow of society is not an abstract concept, but a living force that influences behavior, memory, and culture. It compels viewers to confront uncomfortable truths and to recognize that integration of history, of morality, and of empathy is essential for the growth of both individuals and societies. In this light, the portrait is more than a work of art. It is a window into the soul of humanity, reflecting the complex interplay between light and darkness, innocence and cruelty, appearance and reality. It teaches that the acknowledgement of the collective shadow is not optional. It is a responsibility. The boy's existence, once hidden behind the facade of a simple smile, now challenges us to examine the truths we have suppressed, the lives we have ignored, and the moral debts that remain unresolved, urging us to confront the shadow in order to move toward a more conscious and just society. The boy's smile in the portrait is not merely an expression of fleeting happiness or aesthetic charm. It is a profound symbol of resilience, a quiet yet powerful testament to the human capacity to endure even in the harshest conditions. Resilience, in psychological terms, is the ability to withstand, adapt, and ultimately thrive in the face of adversity, trauma, and oppression. For a child born into slavery, resilience is not a theoretical concept. It is a necessity, a means of survival, and an intrinsic part of daily existence. The smile captured on the canvas is thus laden with meaning, functioning simultaneously as a mask, a shield, and a statement of inner strength. On the surface, it appears delicate, almost fragile, as though it could be easily extinguished by the weight of reality. Yet its very presence suggests a force that cannot be completely subdued, an inner light that persists despite the darkness surrounding it. In Jungian terms, the smile can be seen as a symbol of the self, the core of individuality that seeks wholeness and expression even when external circumstances are hostile. The self, in Jungian psychology, represents the totality of the psyche, integrating both conscious and unconscious elements. Here, the boy's outward smile is a manifestation of his conscious adaptation, while beneath it lies an unconscious reservoir of courage, hope, and an undying sense of identity. The duality of the smile, simultaneously expressive and concealing, illustrates the delicate balance between vulnerability and strength. The boy's ability to present joy or serenity, despite his circumstances, is a form of psychological resilience that communicates a deeper truth. Even in the most oppressive systems, the human spirit can retain its light. This resilience encoded in a smile is also a reflection of the profound adaptability of the psyche. Children, in particular, develop mechanisms to navigate situations where control, freedom, and safety are severely restricted. The smile becomes a tool, a learned expression that communicates acceptance, compliance, or harmlessness to those in power, thereby offering a measure of protection. Yet beyond mere survival, the smile conveys something more profound. It signals an internal refusal to surrender one's humanity entirely. It becomes a quiet act of defiance, a subtle assertion that despite the circumstances imposed upon him, the boy retains an inner life that cannot be wholly conquered. This understanding of resilience is deeply intertwined with the recognition of suffering. The smile does not negate the trauma of enslavement. It coexists with it, creating a poignant tension that reflects the complexity of human experience. To the observer, the smile is beautiful and seemingly simple, yet knowing the boy's history transforms it into a powerful symbol of endurance. It speaks of the capacity to carry pain without letting it entirely define the self, of finding moments of expression and identity, even within structures designed to strip humanity away. The psychological implications of this resilience are profound. Resilience is not merely reactive, it is proactive, an active engagement with one's circumstances in order to preserve a sense of self. The boy's smile embodies this engagement. It is both a response to the external environment and a declaration of the internal world. It signals that even when agency is limited, there remains a space within which the self can assert itself, however subtly. The smile also serves as a bridge between the individual and the observer, a conduit for empathy that transcends time and context. When we look at the portrait today, the smile invites us to recognize the boy's humanity, to acknowledge his struggle, and to feel the quiet courage embedded in his expression. It calls attention to the inner lives of those who have historically been silenced, reminding us that resilience is often hidden in the smallest gestures, the subtlest expressions, and the moments of apparent ordinary composure. Furthermore, the smile challenges assumptions about strength and endurance. Resilience is frequently romanticized or simplified in popular imagination, yet the reality of survival under oppression is fraught with complexity, contradictions, and profound psychological labor. The boy's smile reflects this labor. It is at once a survival mechanism, a personal assertion, and a witness to suffering. It embodies the paradox that resilience does not erase trauma, but coexists with it, allowing the individual to continue living, adapting, and asserting a sense of self despite the surrounding constraints. On a symbolic level, the resilience in the boy's smile also speaks to the enduring potential of the human spirit. Across cultures and epochs, humanity has created symbols to represent endurance, hope, and the capacity to transcend suffering. In this portrait, the smile functions as such a symbol, connecting the personal experience of one child to universal themes of courage, fortitude, and the determination to retain dignity in the face of injustice. It communicates that resilience is not always loud or overt. It can be quiet, understated, and yet profoundly powerful. Finally, the smile reminds us that resilience is relational as well as individual. The observer's recognition of the boy's circumstances, the historical investigation into his life, and the acknowledgement of his humanity all complete the narrative of survival. His resilience is not only encoded in his expression, but is also realized when others bear witness to it, honor it, and allow it to speak across time. The boy's smile thus becomes a living testament to the capacity of the human spirit to endure, adapt, and assert its presence even in the most oppressive circumstances, illustrating that true resilience is as much about maintaining one's inner world as it is about navigating the external one. The revelation that the boy in the portrait was born into slavery transforms our perception of the image, compelling us to recognize not only his life, but the countless others who were erased from history. Remembering what was deliberately forgotten is a moral and psychological imperative, because societies that allow erasure are societies that fail to confront their shadows, and the consequences of such omissions ripple across generations. The portrait is more than a representation of a child. It is a gateway into a historical truth that was suppressed, hidden, and obscured by cultural narratives that chose convenience over reality. Every brushstroke, every carefully painted detail now carries the weight of absence, representing the lives that were never recorded, the voices that were silenced, and the identities that were denied acknowledgement. Remembering what was erased is, in a Jungian sense, a process of reintegration, of bringing to consciousness that which was hidden in collective and personal shadows. The collective shadow of society includes all those experiences, lives, and traumas that have been systematically ignored, yet they continue to shape the moral, cultural, and psychological landscape. To restore memory is to confront these shadows, to acknowledge the complexity of the past, and to reclaim a humanity that was denied recognition. The act of remembrance is not passive. It is active, requiring curiosity, courage, and a willingness to feel the weight of history. The portrait, once perceived as a simple image of joy, now demands engagement with the boy's reality, forcing viewers to reconcile the dissonance between appearance and truth. This process mirrors the broader human necessity to honor what has been erased, because what is not remembered risks being repeated, and what is invisible is often treated as insignificant or unworthy of attention. Historical erasure functions not only to obscure suffering, but also to maintain existing power structures. Those in positions of authority often dictate whose stories are told and whose are left out. The boy's erasure, like that of many others, reflects a systemic decision that certain lives were not to be valued, recorded, or remembered. Recognizing and remembering these lives challenges that system of omission, serving as an act of moral and ethical reclamation. In Jungian psychology, confronting and integrating what has been repressed is essential for wholeness. The same principle applies to society. Collective acknowledgement of what has been erased restores balance, justice, and awareness. Remembering the boy is not only about honoring his life, it is about confronting the cultural forces that sought to deny him identity and humanity, and about understanding how those forces continue to influence present-day structures of inequality and silence. The portrait itself becomes an instrument of remembrance, bridging the past and present, allowing viewers to witness what was once concealed. The act of looking, truly seeing, and learning about the boy's history transforms the image from decoration into a moral and psychological catalyst, challenging observers to confront uncomfortable truths and acknowledge the hidden dimensions of their own cultural inheritance. Remembering what was erased also carries a symbolic function. It restores narrative continuity. History is often fragmented, with entire communities, experiences, and individuals missing from official records. By uncovering the boy's story, we begin to repair the gaps, to acknowledge that human experience cannot be fully understood if silence and omission are treated as acceptable substitutes for truth. This process is deeply empathetic as well as educational, cultivating a consciousness that recognizes the interconnectivity of lives and the moral responsibility to honor them. On a personal level, remembering what was erased reminds us of the value of witness and acknowledgement. Each act of recognition affirms existence and dignity. The boy, whose life was threatened with erasure through systemic oppression, is reclaimed through memory, and in doing so, society is confronted with the consequences of its silence. Memory becomes an act of resistance against injustice, a way of giving presence to those whom history attempted to render absent. Moreover, remembering has a healing quality. Though it cannot undo suffering, it validates experience, acknowledges pain, and allows subsequent generations to learn from the truths that were once hidden. The boy's portrait, in this sense, becomes a symbol of restorative awareness. His smile, once viewed as simple or aesthetic, now embodies the triumph of presence over erasure, of truth over omission, and of humanity over neglect. The act of remembering is transformative because it invites society to confront its moral and ethical obligations. To honor what was erased is to confront the uncomfortable realities of oppression and to integrate those realities into a collective understanding of history, morality, and identity. By reclaiming lost stories, by bringing shadows into the light, societies and individuals alike engage in a process of reconciliation with the past, cultivating consciousness that is aware, compassionate, and morally attuned. The boy's life, once at risk of being forgotten entirely, becomes a beacon of what it means to restore memory, to resist erasure, and to honor the silent struggles that history has too often concealed. Through his portrait, we are reminded that remembering is not only a responsibility but also a profound act of justice and affirmation, a way to ensure that what was once denied a voice now speaks with clarity, power, and resonance. The portrait of the boy, initially perceived as a simple and charming depiction of childhood, transforms into something far more complex and morally charged once the truth of his origins is revealed. What was once appreciated merely for aesthetic qualities now becomes a lens through which we confront profound ethical, historical, and psychological questions. This transformation illustrates the power of art to serve as a mirror, reflecting not only individual experience but also the values, blind spots, and ethical responsibilities of society. A single image that once seemed innocent carries within it layers of meaning, asking viewers to examine not only the circumstances of the boy's life, but also their own perceptions, assumptions, and complicity in the broader systems that allowed such suffering to occur. The transformation of this image into a moral question begins with the recognition of its duality. On one hand, the smile evokes warmth, joy, and innocence, but on the other, knowledge of his enslavement forces a confrontation with the realities of oppression, exploitation, and systemic injustice. This duality compels viewers to question how appearances can deceive, how beauty can mask cruelty, and how historical narratives are shaped by selective memory and omission. In Jungian terms, the portrait functions as a confrontation with the collective shadow, the unacknowledged, suppressed, and often uncomfortable truths that linger within the collective psyche. By presenting a subject whose external expression suggests light and joy while whose life was marked by suffering, the image forces engagement with these shadow aspects, compelling observers to reflect on what society chooses to see, what it chooses to ignore, and what it is responsible for acknowledging. The moral questions evoked by the portrait are both historical and timeless. Who was this boy and what forces shaped his life? Who benefited from his subjugation and who remained indifferent to his suffering? Why were so many lives erased, and how many more have gone unnoticed by history? Each question opens a space for reflection on justice, human dignity, and the ethical responsibility to confront uncomfortable truths rather than hide from them. This process of questioning is not abstract. It is profoundly personal, as it forces individuals to consider their own relationship with truth, memory, and ethical accountability. The portrait becomes a silent interlocutor, asking viewers to recognize that engagement with history is not passive but requires an active moral consciousness. In examining the image, one is compelled to interrogate not only the boy's circumstances, but also the broader social structures that allowed such inequities to persist. The transformation of a simple image into a moral question also underscores the power of representation. While the portrait is a single static depiction, it carries dynamic potential to influence understanding, empathy, and ethical reflection. It demonstrates that art does not merely represent life. It shapes the ways in which life is perceived, remembered, and interpreted. By revealing the hidden truths behind the boy's smile, the image challenges the observer to expand their awareness beyond surface-level interpretations and to confront the deeper realities encoded within human history. The moral dimension of the portrait extends to its ability to provoke action or reflection in the present. It reminds viewers that recognizing past injustice is not an endpoint but a starting point for ethical engagement. To confront the moral questions raised by the portrait is to engage in a process of witnessing, acknowledgement, and, ultimately, responsibility, both to those who suffered and to the societies that must reckon with their legacies. The boy's smile, once perceived as purely innocent, now carries the weight of ethical inquiry. It demands that the observer consider the tension between appearance and reality, between the comfort of ignorance and the discomfort of truth. It challenges individuals to see the humanity behind historical erasure and to confront the moral implications of complicity, indifference, or silence. Furthermore, the portrait illustrates the universality of moral questioning in the face of hidden truths. It demonstrates that ethical engagement is not only about judging past actions, but also about understanding how similar dynamics operate in the present, how systems of power continue to marginalize, silence, or exploit, and how individuals and societies can respond with awareness and compassion. In this sense, the transformation of a simple image into a moral question is both personal and collective, bridging historical reflection with contemporary responsibility. The image becomes an instrument of awakening, inviting viewers to reconsider what they know, how they see, and how they choose to act in relation to justice and human dignity. By engaging with the portrait in this way, one participates in a process of moral consciousness, integrating the lessons of the past into an understanding of the present and a commitment to ethical awareness in the future. The transformation is complete when the observer moves from passive admiration to active contemplation, from aesthetic appreciation to moral engagement, recognizing that even a single portrait can illuminate complex truths about humanity, oppression, resilience, and responsibility. The boy's face, frozen in paint yet alive in meaning, reminds us that art can serve as both a window into the past and a mirror for the moral questions that define our shared humanity, compelling us to confront the weight of history, the shadow of society, and the ethical obligations that endure across time. This portrait, once admired only for its charm, has transformed into a mirror reflecting the complexities of humanity. The boy's smile reminds us that resilience can coexist with oppression, that light persists even in the darkest circumstances, and that every erased story carries within it the power to awaken conscience. By remembering what was hidden, acknowledging the shadows of society, and confronting the moral questions embedded in history, we honor not just one boy, but countless lives whose existence was denied recognition. The portrait teaches us that appearances can deceive, but truth endures, and that through seeing, remembering, and reflecting, we have the power to restore dignity, integrate the lessons of the past, and create a more conscious and compassionate world.